Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Armada Village Council. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Take the roll call, please.
Shaw.
Here.
Clark.
Here.
Conan.
Here.
Adair.
Here.
Belkey.
Here.
Sturritt.
Here.
Tarzan. Here.
You have the agenda before you. Can I have a motion?
I'll move to approve the agenda as presented.
Support.
Clark and Shaw. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion's approved. Citizen comments. Would any citizens like to make a comment?
Can I please?
Yes. Please identify yourself.
My name is Andrew Eberly, and I have with me two Armada Tigers tonight. Will you stand up, please? I have prepared a statement, so I will read it. Good evening, Armada. I'm Andrew Eberly here with my sons. We're proud to be a part of Armada. We're here to make this community aware of something important that's happening across the state regarding schools. This has affected my family and this community directly. I present to you my sons. Ruben is in 10th grade and Benjamin is in 9th grade, both proud Armada Tigers. Ruben was enrolled last year and it started off well. But over a paperwork dispute, the school removed him last November. We have evidence that suggests the school broke the law in doing this. We submitted evidence in the form of 2 documents to the board tonight and also to the school board at their August meeting. My sons belong here in the Armada community and at Armada High School, but Superintendent Musry has declared in email that removing my son last year was the right thing to do and that the school will remove both of my sons after October 31st. He declared that after I submitted expert analysis saying that the decision breaks the law, he is still saying that that's the right thing to do. I questioned Mr. Musry if he read the new analysis I submitted, and he did not directly answer me. Think of it, removing healthy, well-behaved, contributing members to the student body over a paperwork dispute, and declaring that this is the right thing to do, even after being presented with evidence to the contrary. Both boys are facing removal soon unless my wife and I violate our deeply held convictions. We're being forced to register at the health department if we want to enroll our children in school. We do not trust the health department after lockdowns, mask mandates, and pressure to fire people for not getting an experimental vaccine. It was the health department behind those decisions, and it is the health department over the decision to remove healthy children from schools across the state of Michigan. Please do not think this is about vaccines. This is about health department claiming authority that it does not have over the education of Michigan children. Think of that. We're not trying to be unreasonable. All we want is to live our convictions, mind our own business, while maintaining our privacy against an agency that we do not trust. I ask everyone this message reaches to please dig into this issue before forming an opinion. This is a complex issue, so we created a website to explain the argument. We're not asking for money, just for citizens to become aware. Let them learn mi.net. Let them learn mi.net. Does the health department get to decide who can or cannot attend to school? This is not just a paperwork dispute, it's our future, and it hurts to see my boys caught in the middle. And if you bear with me, I have an analogy to put this in layman's terms. Imagine a local fire inspector. He has the authority to inspect public buildings for fire code compliance. If a building is unsafe, he can shut it down until fixed. That's his job. But imagine if the fire inspector went further. Imagine he released a memo saying no one could enter any public building unless they first reported to the fire department for mandatory fire safety training. The department would track who attended the training, issue certificates, and bar anyone uncertified from entering any public building, even if the building was perfectly safe and no fire was imminent. Does the inspector have that kind of authority, and should he? No, it's a massive overreach, breaking laws, invading privacy, and controlling access without cause. Plus, it piles extra work on the fire department to log everyone, costs taxpayers more money to run these unnecessary sessions. That's an imaginary scenario, but the analogy describes exactly what's happening with Michigan schools. MDHHS, Department of Health and Human Services, is acting just like the unreasonable fire inspector. Schools are being pressured to bar healthy students from attending classes when there is no fire. This is against the law, yet MDHHS is extending their authority without being checked. What they are doing has created pointless red tape, denied students, like my son, their right to privacy and to an education, while manipulating the schools into using school enrollment authority to enforce it. Since 1978, state law, MCL 333.9215, lets parents submit a written exemption to their school when enrolling their children. But MDHHS is misconstruing a 2015 rule forcing parents to attend health department re-education sessions to get a certified waiver instead of submitting their own written statement. Without that certified waiver, many students are not being allowed to attend school. And schools misunderstand that there is no penalty to them if they do not comply with the unlawful orders from the tyrannical inspector. The fire inspector would not be allowed to do this without those managing the public building going along with it. We do not need the health department's permission to enroll our children in school, and they do not have the authority to demand we ask them to. There is no penalty to the school to follow the law and accept our own written statement, but there is a denial of my children's right to an education because of Armada School's misunderstanding of this issue. It will take the public to educate them. I ask you to review this, talk to school leaders, have them read up on it without giving MDHHS and the health department a blank check. Thank you all for listening. Appreciate you.
Are there any other public comments? Okay. Being done. There's no presentations. We'll move into administrative reports. Who would like to go first here?
Who submitted one?
Yeah, who has submitted the report?
Amy's got first. I do.
Okay, go ahead.
I just want to talk about the Cape Seal project is mostly complete. There's just a few issues that the contractor needs to address, but I'm pretty happy with the final product. Also, there's just a memo in your packet from Paul from Rowe talking about how we need to plow the streets. This is not asphalt. We have to be a little bit more careful with it. And I gave a copy to Dave Wagner as well. The last thing is Marcia Holland was here and she offered to help all of us like with anything that we need. And I do want to take her up on that. I want her to help me find grants for the village for streets. So I just wanted to let everyone know that that's what I want to do, and maybe Michelle can get me her number. So
Sounds good to me.
thank you.
Okay, who else is, Ross, you got something?
Yeah. All right, I've got several updates. I'd like to talk about water tower maintenance first. As most of you know, water tower has been voided and taken out of the water distribution system for about a month now. It's due to scheduled maintenance. 2 teams working on the tower. Team 1 has completed their work. Team 2 arrived today. I was there when they got here at about 3:30. So they will start their operation tomorrow. So far, so good, aside from the fact that the tower's been down for a bit of time. I'm not seeing many issues. We have had, in the month, we've had 1 complaint from a business owner. Other than that, I've not had any complaints called into the village about issues with water pressure or lack of water. Team 2 will be inspecting the standpipe, removing the insulation on it. Tomorrow, they're going to give me an update on the condition of the standpipe. The standpipe is generally in good condition and does not need to be sandblasted or painted. Then we'll be able to get the tower up by the end of the week. If they have to do a little work, it may be into next week. Again, I did do a certain amount of preparation for this. We coordinated with the fire department So they knew that the tower was going to be down for approximately a month and a half, and for them to come up with contingency planning for filling up their tankers and so on. Again, I would expect that the tower is going to be back up at the latest by the end of next week, and that we brought back into the system. Wastewater treatment plant easement. You recall we had a water project to replace the water line at the wastewater treatment plant. We ran into Macomb Orchard Trail easement issues. Recently I've been talking with John Shapka. John Shapka has indicated he's going to give us tomorrow a draft easement. So Jeff, I'm going to be getting that to you to take a peek at. And it's been a bit of a journey. We spent 2 to 3 months in the Department of Transportation before they said, no, it really belongs with the county commissioners, and from there it migrated to Corporation Council. And so, knock on wood, that's going to be resolved within the next couple of weeks. We will not be able to do that project this year. We're just we're running out of season, but we will do what we need to do to get it ready for solicitation, hopefully this winter, so that next spring we can do the work. You recall from previous meetings that we had a water system sanitation survey, water system sanitary survey back in July by Eagle, State Department that's overseeing water. We scored, I think, very well on that inspection. However, we did have 2 deficiencies. One deficiency we literally fixed on the spot. The second deficiency was related to chemical containment. We have chlorine that we inject into the water in very small amounts to kill bacteria. We have to have that not on the floor, but up on containers that would contain a spill. So we have purchased the containment apparatus, and everything is now, with the exception of well 6, everything is now elevated off of the floor. And so I have sent a notice to Eagle asking for them to check us off of that second deficiency. Those are the ones that I'm concerned with. We also have a number of recommendations that we get when we have these inspections. One of the recommendations was that we do well and pump efficiency testing. We did undertake that program here a month or 2 ago. All of our wells and pumps have been checked and are in good shape, with the exception of well number 6. And we'll come back to well number 6 because I've got a motion on it. Lead and galvanized water lines. We've talked about this quite a bit over the last several months. There is a state and there is a federal and state requirement that we notify residents once we determine definitively that they have a likely lead supply line or a galvanized line. As we announced at the last meeting, we believe we have 17 lead connections and approximately 48 galvanized connections. Those letters have to go out within 30 days, and we've sent those letters out. We're also going to send in the upcoming water sewer bills just a general information letter about what the village's plan is to replace those lines. We've also talked about this quite a bit. The village is responsible to replace those lines at our cost. We have a plan in place. Ro and I have a plan in place. I need to bring it to council because there's obviously money involved, there's budgeting and so on. Our intention would be to get the lead service connections replaced next year, and then we'll work on the galvanized connections, the lead connections being a priority. As part of our budget, we had a plan to replace the 2 heaters in the water treatment plant. I have a start date now of 5 November for that action. So I'm working with Northern Heating and Cooling out of Richmond to do that. We've submitted for reimbursement of approximately $1,600 to the state for our TMF grant. We have approximately $1,600 remaining. Of that grant, it was about $62,000. We've used every bit of that except for the $1,600, and I anticipate putting that in by December. So we'll have gotten all of that money back. Our 2025 Eagle required sampling and monitoring program for village water has been all completed. Everything has been turned in. I have spent some extra time because we've had some issues over the last year or so with our water operator not necessarily getting reports in on time, and that gets us a violation. Now, we've not had to pay for any of those violations, but I don't want that to keep happening. That's why we employ them, is to make sure that they don't get us into trouble. So all that testing has been done. Everything needed to be submitted to the state by the 10th of October, and that has been done. Now, that does not mean we stop testing. We're always testing and sampling our water for what's in it and any issues that may occur. But the sampling for 2025 has been completed on time. And finally, I'm going to be talking with Catherine Wynn, the F&V Regional Manager, this Friday. Mike, you're welcome to join if you want. This is mostly to start discussions about the potentially a follow-on contract with them. We don't have to go with them, but I'm going to start having that conversation. Remember, Catherine, that we asked to simply extend for a year, and F&V came in and said, well, after saying they would extend for a year, came in and said, well, we'd rather have a new contract. So I'm going to start the conversation with her on that this Friday. That's all I got.
Okay, I don't, okay, I don't see any other reports here. So, moving on, pardon?
On the consent.
We don't have any other, okay, let's on to our consent agenda. You've had a chance to review that.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Support.
All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Motion's approved. No old business to discuss, moving on to new business. One of my favorite things, the auditor's report.
All right, I'm about to uncover.
Can we scoot before he opens that up and blinds me again?
Be careful, Dave.
Good.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Curtis McBride. I'm a CPA for McBride Manning Company. With me this evening are Amy and Chelsea. They were also involved in the audit engagement this year. So we're here to present the results of our audit of the village for the period ending March 31st, 2025. All of you should have a hard copy of your presentation in front of you. I know sometimes it's hard to see up on the screen. The information, the numbers get a little small up there, so please follow along with your hard copy if you prefer. Before I get into the slides, I first want to talk about our audit opinion. There are three types of opinions you can receive from your auditor. The first is what we call a clean or unmodified audit opinion. That means that we believe your financial statements are reliable and they're in compliance with our professional standards. Not necessarily our professional standards as a firm, but under generally accepted accounting principles under governmental accounting standards. Then the second type is what we call a qualified opinion, which means for the most part they're in compliance, but there may be a few exceptions to that. And then the third type of opinion is what we call an adverse opinion, which means that we do not believe the financial statements are reliable and they're not in compliance with our standards. I am pleased to announce that for March 31st, 2025, the village did receive a clean or unmodified audit opinion from our firm. And I just want to clarify one major thing with respect to that opinion. We are not providing an opinion on the financial health of the village. That's not the focus of our audit. Is to provide an opinion over the accuracy of the financial statements and to make sure that they're in compliance with our professional standards. moving on to the slides. The first fund I want to talk about is the general fund. The general fund primarily derives its revenues from property taxes, state shared revenues, and federal, state, and local grants. So here we're looking at the balance sheet for your general fund. You can see you had about $2,111,000 of assets on hand at the end of the year. You can see a large portion of those assets was in cash of $1,662,000. You see you had another $173,000 in investments, so that's 2 CDs that you have. And then you can see you had about $145,000 of liabilities against those assets to finish the year with an ending fund balance level of about $1,966,000 in your general fund. I'm going to talk about the general fund level, fund balance level in a little bit more detail in a subsequent slide, so be prepared for that. In looking at the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance, so this is the income statement for the year for the general fund. You can see you generated just over $1,095,000 of revenues during the year. You can see $487,000 of that was from property taxes, another $237,000 from distributions from the state of Michigan, so that's your state revenue share. And then you can see the special assessment, so that's your PA 33 assessment that generated about $95,000 or $96,000 during the year. You can see you spent about $848,000 in your general fund during the year. So you had a net change or a net increase to your general fund balance level of about $247,000 for 2025. Here, looking specifically at sources of revenue for your general fund, comparing 2025 to 2024. So you can see total revenues went from about $1,036,000 in 24 up to about $1,095,000 for 2025. Just looking at the differences between the 2 years, you can see property tax revenues did increase. They went from $463,000 in 24 up to about $487,000 for 25. And just to clarify, that is not because property tax rates have increased, because they have not. That's because the taxable values associated with those properties increased from 24 to 25. You can see state share revenues did increase slightly from $226,000 up to $238,000 in 25. One of the other differences, even though it's a small number, you can see contributions went from about $17,000 in 24 to about $4,000 in 25. That's because back in 2024, you received a $13,000 Parks grant. So that explains the difference between 24 and 25 for contributions. Focusing on the pie chart, that really drives the point home that your general fund is primarily supported by property taxes and state share revenues. Those two revenue sources make up about 66% of your revenues in your general fund. Focusing on expenditures by type in the general fund, again comparing 2025 to 2024, you can see total expenditures went from about $822,000 in 24 up to about $848,000 for 2025. You can see wages and other payroll-related costs did increase from $466,000 to $493,000. Capital outlay. So you spent about $100,000 in capital outlay for 2025. So the major capital outlay items were a salt dome purchase for $52,000. That was during your 24-25 fiscal year. Then also a playscape for about $25,000. Those were some of the major capital outlay purchases during the 25 fiscal year. Looking at the pie chart, you can see that wages and payroll-related costs made up about 58% or close to 60% of your annual budget in your general fund. That's to be expected. A village that has a police department and a DPW, those are obviously labor-intensive departments, so you would expect that labor and labor-related costs would make up a significant portion of your general fund budget. The next three funds I want to talk about briefly are the street funds. So these are quite a bit different than general in that these are what we call special revenue funds. So we call them special revenue funds because their fund balance levels are restricted for a special purpose, and that's for the maintenance and construction of streets in the village. In other words, you can't use street funds for general operating purposes. They have to stay with streets. So looking at the balance sheet here, and I should point out that major local streets primarily derive their revenues from distributions from the state of Michigan, from the Michigan Department of Transportation, from MDOT. And then the municipal street fund is from property taxes. So you have a tax millage for streets, and that's your municipal street fund. So looking at the balance sheet for your local street, you had about $102,000 of assets on hand at the end of the year. You had about $30,000 of liabilities against those assets. So you finished the year at about $72,000 of ending fund balance. Moving over to Major Street, you can see you had about $348,000 of assets on hand at the end of the year. You had about $26,000 of liabilities against the assets. So that left you with an ending fund balance level of about $322,000 in Major Streets. Municipal Street had about $187,000 in assets, about $12,000 of liabilities against the assets, and finished the year with an ending fund balance level of about $176,000. Now looking at the income statement for these three funds, you can see local street generated about $661,000 of revenues during the year. If you notice, your municipal street fund transferred $380,000 over to local streets during the year. You are allowed to do that. So your municipal tax millage, that can be used for streets. So it can help supplement either the major or local streets. So you are allowed to transfer money between municipal streets and local streets. You can see you spent about $645,000 in local streets. So you had a net increase to your fund balance level of about $15,000. If you notice, you had significantly more in expenditures in your local streets than you did major streets and municipal street. That's because you did have a couple of significant local street projects going on during the 24-25 fiscal year. So that was primarily the First and Simon reconstruction projects. That was in 2025. That was about $554,000 of those total expenditures were just on those projects. Looking at Major Street, you can see you generated about $161,000 of revenues during the year. You spent about $17,000, so you had a net increase to your fund balance level of about $92,000 in your Major Street. Municipal Street Fund generated about $199,000, again, the majority of that from that tax millage. You spent about $435,000 in municipal streets. $380,000 of that was transfers over to local street. So you actually used up about $236,000 of your municipal street fund balance during the year. I have a couple slides here where I get into some trend analysis, beginning with property tax revenues. So going back to 2021, now I should point out that this is both your operating millage, which goes through the general fund, and your street millage for municipal streets. It's both of those property taxes. So you can see it generated about $541,000 of property taxes back in 2021. It went up to about $569,000 for 2023. And then, as I mentioned previously, you generated about $681,000 in property taxes for March 31st, 2025. So you see a positive or upward trend here in property tax revenues. And just to clarify, it's not because rates have increased. It's because taxable values in the village have increased from 2021 to 2025. Now, the interesting thing about this, I just want to stay on this for 1 minute here. If we took this all the way back to 2009, believe it or not, you generated about $594,000 in property taxes in 2009. So if you notice, it took you all the way until 2024 to generate more property taxes than you did back in 2009. And as you remember from one of our first slides, that's your primary revenue source in your general fund. That's because if you remember, in 2010, we had a bit of a housing market crisis in Michigan. So property values declined sharply in a very short period of time. Taxable values followed suit, and that means property taxes also went down on those properties. Well, the state of Michigan places caps on increases in property taxes from year over year. So you have Proposal A, which places a cap on individual properties, and then you have the Headley Amendment, which comes in and places the same cap on the village as a whole. So it has literally taken you about 14 years to climb out of the hole that you experienced back in 2010. Now on this next slide, this is the 5-year historical fund balance trend for general. Again, going back to 2021, You can see a finished 21 with about a fund balance level of about $1,272,000. It went up just over $1.5 million at the end of 2023. And then you finished 25, as I mentioned previously, with an ending fund balance level of about $1,966,000 in your general fund. Now, before I get into a deeper conversation about fund balance, I do want to talk about water and sewer briefly. Now, these funds are very different than the general industry funds. These are what we call proprietary funds because they're accounted for like a for-profit private business. And that's because the village owns the water and sewer plants, all the major infrastructure assets associated with the plants, and they charge the users for use of the systems. These are intended to be self-sustaining funds. So you need to make sure that your commodity charge that you're charging to the users at a minimum cover your operating expenses on an annual basis. In addition to that, if you have debt, you need to have a debt service charge that will cover your bonds outstanding. And then of course, you need to have capital improvement charges to set money aside for future capital improvements. You need to make sure you're covering all of those costs in your user charges. So looking at the statement in that position for sewer fund, you can see it had about $6,575,000 of total assets on hand. However, if you notice, there's an asset category called fixed assets. That would be the actual sewer plant itself and all the major infrastructure associated with the plant. That's about $5.9 million. So out of the $6.6 million you have in assets, $5.9 million is tied up in the actual plant itself. Those are not liquid assets. In other words, you can't pay bills with those assets. So the majority of your assets are not liquid in sewer. You can see it had about $3,824,000 of liabilities against those assets. The majority of that was a bond you have outstanding of $3,705,000 at the end of 25, and that matures in 2040. So you can see your ending net position in sewer was $2,752,000. But if you notice, there's two categories here for net position. The unrestricted net position of $599,000 is the liquid part of your net position. That's the net position that's not tied up in all those infrastructure assets. Moving over to water, you see a very similar situation here. You had about $3,833,000 of total assets, but about $3.47 million was tied up in those non-liquid assets, the infrastructure assets. And then you can see at $140,000 of liabilities, which left you with an ending net position of about $3,693,000. But again, just focusing on the unrestricted portion, the amount that's liquid and not tied up in those infrastructure assets, you only had about $222,000 of liquid net position in your water fund at the end of the year. Okay. Now I have 3 slides here that I really wanted to go over because I know it's a hot topic, not only with the village, but actually a lot of other Michigan municipalities. This conversation and questions about it are coming up everywhere. The Michigan Department of Treasury has realized this, so they've actually started to publish information because they have access to data because everyone submits their audit reports to them. So essentially they give you data to determine how you measure up compared to other municipalities. They even have it very specific about municipality type. So they have cities, townships, villages. So how does the village of Armada measure up to other Michigan villages in the state of Michigan? So there's 3 ratios I want to look at. One is short term, one is medium term, one is long term. So this first one is the what we call the cash solvency ratio. So this looks at short term financial health. How liquid are you? So all this does is literally takes your ending cash balance and compares it to your current liabilities at the end of the year. So your current liabilities are liabilities that are due within 1 year. So obviously you want your cash balance to be higher than your current liabilities, right? That's obvious. So you are at 1,266%. That's high. If you remember, your cash balance was just over $1.6 million. But you have to look at that in context. Believe it or not, from the information published from the Michigan Department of Treasury, the median cash solvency ratio for all Michigan villages was actually 1,695%, which is higher than what yours was. So your situation, the situation the village of Armada is in for their cash balance, it's not unique to you. And in fact, a lot of other Michigan villages had a much higher cash solvency ratio than you did. Now this next one is what we call the budgetary solvency ratio. This is the median term financial health. So this one is probably the one you'd be the most familiar with. I don't like how they call it budgetary solvency ratio, but essentially all this is doing is taking your ending fund balance level in your general fund and comparing it to your annual revenues in the fund. So you, the Village of Armada, you're at 180%, whereas the median budgetary solvency ratio for Michigan villages is 90%. So here, you're actually substantially higher than other Michigan villages in the state of Michigan. And then the last one I want to talk about looks at more long-term financial health, the long-term solvency ratio. I really like this one because it's not really addressed much in your financial statements. It's not the primary focus of it. But what this does is this actually takes all of your funds and puts them together, with the exception of water and sewer. The state of Michigan does not publish information about water and sewer funds because they're supposed to be self-sustaining. So this takes general, all your street funds, your salvage vehicle inspection, actually converts it to how it would be for a private business. In other words, you have all your capital assets and your long-term debt there, and it measures it in relation to your net position in relation to your total revenues. So the Village of Armada was at 256%. The median long-term solvency ratio for Michigan villages was 270%. So you're actually a little bit lower for long-term solvency ratio. But from a practical standpoint, there's not much of a difference between 256% and 270%. I would say you're pretty much on par with this ratio. Now, what does this all mean?
Curtis, that doesn't apply, what I was thinking of, shoot, just lost it. The value of the investments we make is not making any value judgment, just looking at the dollars at this point.
When you say value investments, you mean?
Well, it's not
CDs
making
or-
value judgments about where the money has gone in any of the short, medium, or long-term ratios that you have here.
It's accounting for all of those.
But it's just looking at the money, it's not making a value decision on any of this, whether you put money in the right places or wrong.
It is not.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so continuing on with fund balance. Fund balance is generally measured as a percentage of revenues or expenditures. Now, I don't know why the Michigan Department of Treasury has decided to do this, but they used to measure your fund balance level as a percentage of your annual expenditures. Now it would appear that they're looking at it as a percentage of your revenues for whatever reason. An appropriate fund balance is really a community by community decision. There is not a one-size-fits-all answer because it's based on many variables, which would include budget size, future planned expenditures, health of your other funds, which we'll talk about in a minute. So budget size is an easy one. So having a fund balance level that is 10% of your annual expenditures might be sufficient for the city of Detroit. However, for the Village of Armada, if it was 10% of your annual expenditures, that would only leave you with $85,000 in fund balance. I think everyone in this room would agree that would not be appropriate. It would not be sufficient to have for a rainy day fund for any future planned expenditures. Health of other funds is a big one, right? So while it may appear that you have a hefty fund balance level, do you have other funds that are struggling and may need to be subsidized by your general fund? You have to consider that when you look at your fund balance level. The great thing about your general fund is that it is the fund that has the most flexibility with its money. In other words, we looked at streets. Streets can't use their resources for general operating purposes. However, unless there's a specific restriction within general, generally speaking, your general fund balance can be used to help subsidize other funds, whether it's water, sewer, even streets, whatever it may be. So having the flexibility in your general fund is actually a good thing. Recommendations. I know I talked about this last year. You really should be discussing potential unexpected events or planned expenditures in the next 5 years. Consider preparing a long-term forecast and a capital improvement plan. A capital improvement plan is critical. And really, it should be more than 5 years, right? It should be realistically anywhere from 5 to 15 years. And it's something that's flexible. It changes over time, right? So circumstances may be different 3 or 4 years from now. And when that happens, you update your capital improvement plan. Your capital improvement plan theoretically justifies your current ending fund balance level. Or maybe it doesn't. But the whole point is, you really should be coming up for establishing a capital improvement plan. And a lot of other communities they establish what we call a fund balance policy. My only recommendation is that you should not make it a strict policy. In other words, you shouldn't say general fund balance will be 10% of annual expenditures. That's dangerous. If you do have a fund balance policy, I would make it more, have parameters, or even establish a minimum fund balance level is typically what I see. The information that I did retrieve on this presentation was from the Michigan Department of Treasury in a webinar they published May 8th, 2025. So again, there really is no one-size-fits-all approach for your fund balance level. However, having discussions about it and creating a capital improvement plan is critical.
Awesome.
Very nice. Thank you.
Can I have a plug here?
Yeah, yes. You don't want to be blinded?
No.
Let me see if I can shoot this down.
You got a motion. Curtis, we didn't have the single audit, right?
Correct.
So ignore that on your agenda sheet, just the first motion.
And make a motion to accept the audit for fiscal year ending March 31st, 2025, and to place on file.
Support.
Should we have a roll on that?
We don't need a roll on this thing, no.
No, not
Okay,
just.
all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Okay. Motion's approved.
Thank you, Curtis.
Good stuff. As always.
No, I got it, we got to sign it, but,
Yeah,
yeah, so,
yeah, I know.
okay,
I just-
all right.
Okay, then moving on. Single waste hauler bid documents. Now, you got the big bid package, I hope you've reviewed it. Michelle's been on the committee. We also have our township supervisor here, Chris Rachi, who's really spearheaded this. So you can ask him any questions you'd like. And Jeff, you reviewed this.
Jeff actually prepared the
Yeah, I did
documents.
prepare the documents.
Pretty good.
I did it pretty good. Of course, Michelle did not include it in my package, so I'm gonna have to go by memory, but.
Here,
Oh, perfect.
Didn't I email it to you? Oh, it's fine, I only did, but Dave
So-
doesn't need this.
So, this is a bid. We're going into the market to secure unit pricing. And what the bid document basically describes is levels of service. So we kind of took an a la carte approach. We looked at what I would call your basic service. So that's weekly curbside collection, both in the township and the village, of household waste, in the normal stream of household waste, and recyclables. So that's your kind of your base service, you get that weekly. We're also asking them to incorporate into their pricing once a month bulk. So every township and village resident would have an opportunity on a designated day. I think we had the first collection day of the month. You could put out bulk items. That's your mattresses, your white goods, appliances, large appliances, things like that. So that's included in the base service. Where we kind of differentiate between the township and the village is on seasonal yard waste collection. Township did not need that service. We are asking them to provide a separate price for yard waste. And Michelle is very passionate about this issue.
Well, it is a question that we get
Yeah.
100 times in the spring and in the
Right.
fall, so.
So what that would allow us to do is roughly from, I'll just say May 1st till November 30th. During that season, we're gonna get a unit price, what it would cost for them to collect yard waste. There's three types of containers. Michelle, jump in or Joe if I mistake, but they could use yard bags, paper bags. They can use cans with a sticker, and I think there was one other. They can bundle sticks of a certain length and diameter, and they will all pick that up curbside. Now, why is that important? from talking to Michelle and Joe when we were designing the invitation to bid, DPW struggles to keep up in the fall. It's the leaf collection and things like that is so overwhelming that just takes up most of their day. So this is, can we afford it? I can't say right now. That's why we're going into the market to get that kind of level of service. But if the numbers look good and we get a good price, we can add that service to our menu of services, and we would have that service every year. The township is also at their collection site. They are also asking for pricing to have the vendor come out once a month and service the collection site there. So that's a once a month service for them. Collection days, I believe where we landed was the village would have 1 day per week for their weekly collection. The township would have 2 collection days, largely because they're such a much larger geographic area. So that was kind of where we landed. And I think that pretty much covers it. Chris, I don't know if I left anything major out on it.
No, any questions?
Yeah.
Anything comes up in one.
So we reserve the right to reject all bids. We reserve the right to pick which service we want. Township has the same privilege under the documents. And we're just hoping that we'll get really, really good pricing. That's what you hope when you go with a bid, because it's all focused on pricing. I should mention this is designed on a cart basis. In other words, you have to, which is normally the case right now, I believe, with village residents. Most of the companies provide carts.
Yes.
So we're not deviating from that, but I just think it's important to note this would be a cart service. So your household would be a 95-gallon, large container. Recyclables would be 64-gallon containers, slightly smaller. And like I said, I did describe how the yard weighs. There will be a period in the village where they will pick up Christmas trees and recycle those. We're hoping that will be included in just a norm. There won't be an additional charge, but I just want to mention that's another service that we were asking for. So that in a nutshell is it, but if anybody has any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Chuck, were we planning on, like, by the paperwork in the packet that after this meeting, what we're gonna do is try to wrap up the solicitation package and then get it out for bids, is that?
Yes, Chris has volunteered to upload this to the site where all these vendors look to see who's going out to bid. So that'll get posted, uploaded to that site. We do have a mandatory contractor vendor meeting, so they have to come to this meeting. If they don't attend the meeting, then their bid would not be accepted. So it's a mandatory meeting. In addition to uploading it to the website, we're also going to selectively mail this out to vendors in the area, just get good coverage. Obviously, you want more bids, that's more competitive.
Yeah.
Timeline. Essentially, we're going to try to get a lot of get through most of the process by year end. But these companies need lead time. And so we would not start, the soonest we would start would be March 1 of 2026. They just, to transition, to get their carts collected, to get the new carts distributed. It's a pretty laborious process. So that's the rough timeline. We're not locking in on that completely because, again, a lot of it will depend on what the contractor is able to do. Two important things I will note. It's not mandatory that you take the service because you will be billed by this contractor. But if you don't, you can't go out and hire someone. So the village and the township will have only one authorized collection company.
Right, exclusive.
Exclusive. It's exclusive franchise, so to speak, that they would have to service the two communities. You could choose not to pay it, but you can't go and cut a better deal with someone else.
Right.
So that's important to note. And then there is a transition period. We recognize that some people have contracts, so we have provided a transition period. So if someone just signed up, we're going to give them approximately a year to transition off of their current provider if it's not the successful bidder. So I think those are two important things to know.
The people that are using the transfer site can still continue, they don't have to take this contract, they can continue to use the transfer site.
They can, but that's going down to once a month.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, well, now's the time to do that.
yeah.
Right, Chris?
I would say I can't appreciate the amount of effort that's gone into this. This is not easy, and you're trying to consider every eventuality. I do have a couple questions. The reason I was asking, is this ready to go, is as I look through this, I see that there's nothing in there for businesses. So if one of our principal reasons was to limit trash haulers from coming into the village, reduce traffic, have them come in on one day of the week, say, that this excludes the businesses, so I see potential issues there. Is there not an opportunity to do businesses as well on this?
I think some communities have extended the pricing to them if it's some, but again, remember, it's a completely different service.
Yeah.
They're gonna have roll-off containers
Probably.
largely. In fact, they're probably required by our ordinance to have a roll-off container. So I don't know if it's necessarily, Ross, an apple-to-apple comparison.
Right. May not be. Would
Yeah.
Businesses down in the business block, separated from our industrial districts, would they potentially be able to opt in for residential service, I guess? I mean, they're not, in theory, they're not.
I think that's a question we may have to deal with. I know.
We'd have to look at what they were approved for though under the planning
Yeah.
commission, because they're most likely approved to have a dumpster, not.
Yeah, that you're getting into site plans.
Yeah.
Most site plans have to show a disposal site, so.
Yeah,
I just think the technology is very different.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I'm not trying to throw a monkey wrench into it. It's
No, that's
just,
okay.
I see people working with businesses to dispose of their trash through a business. You know, I'll give you $10.
Well, yeah, now that you
Dump my
put it
trash.
out there.
And, well, I'm
That's
not
a good idea, Ross. I like
Yeah.
this.
Hey, that's a great idea. No, I'm not, I would like to get into it. I'm just saying, this is a reality. People aren't stupid. They're gonna find a way.
Yeah, and the other thing I want to say, Ross, and I just went through this where I live, you have to be very careful when you try to take one uniform service and apply it
To everybody.
because the trucks, they're big trucks.
Yeah.
And for them to work through an alley and it's much easier for them to get the container, but it's hard for them to always access. So apartments that provide them with a roll-off dumpster, they're not gonna sit 64 recycling cans. I don't think we want, I should say we, but I don't think the village wants
You can
64 of those cans,
Yeah.
you know, in place of one
Yeah.
dumpster.
Well, and I know this isn't really intended to solve all problems. We're gonna wind up with some issues we're gonna have to deal with. I guess, just another one, I mean, I'm not adverse to letting it go forward, is there not an opportunity to do a rent or buy a container? I don't wanna rent a 96-gallon container for 20 years. I'll buy it instead of pay 10 times that amount or 20 times that amount over a
So-
period of time. Is there an option?
Yeah, so in my community, we just implemented for the first time mechanized the carts. And, you know, based on my household use, I immediately bought a cart, just to, you have no choice. I mean,
Yeah.
you have to get the stuff to the curb.
On
So,
mine, they just furnished it.
yeah, well, that's
No
what,
rent, no charge,
you know,
just
Well, I understood we had to rent them, in this, as I read it, so,
I don't think, there's not gonna be a rental.
so there might be.
No, they're gonna provide,
They're
that.
gonna
It'll be
provide
baked
it.
into the price.
And I may have misspoke.
Oh, okay, all right, I mean, I asked.
Yeah, I'm
Michelle a bunch of
sorry.
questions, so-
Yeah, so there's no rent, there's not gonna be a rental fee for carts. What we did do,
Which will have our own.
what Chris suggested, or like, what I thought was a good idea, was we asked them to provide us a unit price for additional carts. That's a really good idea, because again, you can't predict what every household's gonna need.
Right.
Yeah,
But since they have to use the cart, what you wanna avoid is having someone habitually every week putting stuff outside the cart. That's where it starts to break down.
Okay.
Well, I
So-
guess my question, no, I got a question. Sorry, Chris. Okay, so, you know, in a normal week, I'm fine, but say at Christmas, you know, I've got 2 bins worth. Can I set another bin out, or do I have to ask them to provide me another bin?
If you have a bin, you can do it, but
Yeah, I
the
guess,
way I read it, you
yeah.
have to have it.
My
I'm sorry,
God.
Chris, I didn't
No,
think about
exactly.
that till just
You'd have to
now.
have bins, or that's the reason why.
I wonder,
the
but I
transfer
guess-
site's still an option, so.
But that's a question we might ask them. Can you call and say, hey, can I have 2 bins week between Christmas and New Year's?
Yeah, I think that's, based on the industry, that's gonna be hard.
I have waste management, but you got, I mean, they give you the big one, no
95.
charge on it, no rental.
Right,
Right.
But
and a
it
recycle.
used to be you could put another can out there too, but no more.
No.
That's, you
I
get
think
that
that's the way it's
filled,
happening.
that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, they won't take anything else.
I actually have to pay for 2 bins because
Right, and
we use more, so I
I'll just,
pay
I
for 2.
will say one other thing. If you are, not everybody likes to recycle, I will tell you, since this is all new to me in my household. If you are a dedicated recycler, you will cut your household stream, what goes in the big can, at least minimally 50%,
Oh,
by
yeah, about
50%.
50%.
Yeah, if you
Yeah.
religiously
Yeah.
recycle your household, you know, cans and some of the
Plastic.
plastics, the jugs,
Back to the bird barrels.
your 95, your 95 gallon will go a lot farther.
I do.
I almost need an additional recycling to
Right.
replace it. And so not only is that good to not overflow your 95 gallon one, it's good for the environment because you're taking things that can be recycled out of the stream that goes into a landfill. And so that's the positive.
Yeah, I mean, this is all good stuff. I'm just, the village, once we would do this, the village office is gonna get inundated with questions for about a year and a half.
No, but their questions though can be directed more towards the.
Yeah, they have to
the-
designate
they
a
have to-
field
Yeah.
representative.
I
Yes,
did see
to
Yeah,
them,
so-
not us.
Yeah, and they are, you know, the
It's
company.
gonna be, you know, where do I put my,
Yeah.
where do I put my can? I talked to
Well-
somebody today that says, I can't put my can on Fulton, I gotta put it on Center, because that's where my driveway goes to.
Right.
And so how does the hauler know to go to Center
Right.
and pick that can up instead of, you know, they're gonna say,
Yeah.
well, if it's not on Fulton, I'm gonna red slip you,
Yeah,
because,
right.
and then you're gonna get a call.
These contractors now and vendors, they're pretty high tech. I mean, the one that services my community literally has a camera. So they know exactly when they approached your house, what you had out there. If you've missed it and you call them and say, hey, you missed me,
Yeah.
they can
That just
literally
happened.
go to that film and say, guess
Yeah.
what? We were here, you did not have your car.
And they
set
won't
up."
come back.
Well, they
They will if they missed
will,
it.
you
If they
know,
missed
if they missed it.
But if you
Yeah.
didn't have your can
Right,
out,
no,
Right.
no,
Yeah.
mine was out. and
I've
it
had
was-
to run it across the street.
Yeah, I mean, fair is fair, and I'm not trying to
Yeah.
But
sharpshoot any of this.
there's gonna be questions after we
Yeah.
get this done, but this gives you an idea.
Yeah.
So, we good, guys?
Go ahead.
I think one other thing that Chris and I talked about, because I did have a resident call to complain about who she has, actually, it was weird. But, she said that she was in a rehab facility for 3 months, and her son had called and asked their provider to not, can she suspend her service?
Yeah,
For that 3 months, no.
you can't.
So that's one thing though that I mentioned to Chris, I would like to talk to them about including something like that. What about snowbirds? What about,
Yeah, you
you
have to
know,
pay.
Mike, what about
Yeah.
snowbirds? I
Yeah.
mean, really,
Well,
I
we
mean,
pay. We still pay.
you should be able to maybe suspend your service, especially for something like that.
Can't you cancel it and then start it
No.
back up?
No,
They won't let you?
Won't let you do that.
no,
I can attest to that because we tried doing that.
Because I pay once a year.
Yeah,
so,
that's what we do.
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and we are continuing, we're asking for pricing for the year options to see if they would give a bigger discount for that
Yeah.
option. So I think again, I can't guarantee you, as Ross said, there's a lot of
There's a lot of
stuff in
moving
that
parts.
paper, but, you know, the biggest advantage this community has is that you already have people using the cart system. That's a huge
Right.
hurdle to go
Right.
to go from literally being able to throw it on the ground and they'll pick up everything to carts. So I'm hoping, yes, there will be phone calls, but I don't think it's gonna be as dramatic a change as it might otherwise be, because you guys already are utilizing the
Right.
carts.
I think it's important for the public to understand that one of the biggest reasons that the village is even considering this, because we are aware that this has been voted on before and it's been voted on, we get it. But with the money that we're putting into new roads, the less heavy garbage trucks we have going over them 2-3 times a week, it's gonna save the roads. So that's the biggest reason why when Chris approached, you know, we thought now is really the time to start considering it, because we have to pay for our own roads, for those that don't know. You know, it's like.
Not to mention, we got garbage cans up there all week now.
Yeah, I know, that doesn't bother me as much as the roads getting ripped up. I mean, it's a lot of money,
So,
so
okay,
we'll see
well,
what happens at the meeting.
we good?
We don't need a motion, right? We're not-
No,
No,
it just so
It
you
was just
know,
for
this
discussion
bid's
purposes.
going out. The timeline's in your packet. So moving on,
Does this have to go to the general public for approval?
It's gonna be an ordinance.
Oh, no.
So the ordinance, the public hearing, people can come,
Oh.
yep, to the public hearing.
so now we have the replacement of well number 5 pipe manifold.
Number
Number
6.
Well number 6. This sounds like something you got, Ross.
It is. Okay, so I mentioned in my commissioner
Administrative
report that I would come back to well number 6. So we did well and pump efficiency testing a month and a half ago. Well 7 came back, well 8 came back in good shape, and we've got metrics now, and we can track those over time and see if there's any degradation, which helps us determine whether or not we got to pull the pump, which is not inexpensive, and do maintenance. Well 6, we could not fully test that. We did basic testing, we could not fully test it because we found that we had a couple stuck valves and a bad check valve in that well. Now that's our oldest well. I don't even know when it was put in. You got an idea? 80s, 70s? It's an older well.
1917.
Probably newer than that. It's got an old pipe manifold, which parts are not easy to find. In any case, the fact that it's got stuck valves is not a dire emergency right now, but it does present problems if we would ever have to shut that well off for some reason. Just basic maintenance, we have to shut it down. You can't really shut it down because you can't turn the valves. And so this is not something we want to let sit out there. I would like to get it done, especially since we've been kind of stymied with the water line to the wastewater treatment plant. You know, we planned a lot in water this year and haven't been able to do some of it for various reasons. So this has come up. Didn't really see it coming. We did have contingency money put away. I would like to get it done. I would like to use the company that was out here that did our well and pump efficiency testing. They're familiar with the equipment. Now our code of ordinances says that if something's over $10,000, I really need to come to council, get council approval. We need to do competitive bidding and so on and so on. The cost for this is the proposal from Northern, who has sourced the valving. And there's literally one of these specialty valves left on a shelf someplace. Literally one. Just talked to him today. I said, please hang on to it. Don't let it go until I get through the meeting tonight. The cost estimated was $9,687, which is just below the threshold of $10,000. But there's always the caveat that something else is going to happen. It's going to take them an extra 5 hours. Well, there's time and labor, right? So it could cost more. So I've written up a resolution that asked for a not to exceed amount of $12,000, but I really don't want to go out and try to find 2 other guys, and that there are other companies out there that could probably come back and do this. And you might say, well, if it's not an emergency, what the heck?
But they've done a lot for us before, too.
We have used Northern before. Northern was recommended by the guys doing our water tower. I trust the water tower guys. Wish they'd get done faster, but I do trust the water tower guys. They have not led us astray. And Northern Well and Pump did work with me. They came back out to finish the job when they didn't have the appropriate equipment and didn't charge us anything they could have. Long story short, I would like to get this done now before the winter. Once we would drop a signed quote back to them, they said 3 to 4 weeks. And now today with, I don't think they're pulling my leg here. I think they really are on their last valve, critical valve for this type of system. I would like to grab that and get this done.
Then you need to make your motion.
Right.
Make your motion.
I'm gonna put 12,000 in there, not to exceed, but the cost on paper right now is 96, so
That's right.
I would've just done it, but I wanted to bring it to council and
Read
see what you guys thought. Okay, so I'm gonna make a motion to approve proposal 25-Q3482 dated 9/29/25 from Northern Well and Pump to make repairs to well 6 pipe manifold valving in the not to exceed amount of $12,000 and allow the water commissioner to sign the proposal for the village.
Support.
Okay.
Ready?
You wanna, yes, take the roll call.
Belkey?
Yes.
Shaw?
Yes.
Stirrit?
Yes.
Garzik?
Yes.
Adair?
Yes.
Clark?
Yes.
Conan?
Yes.
Thank you all. I'm gonna tell them buy the valve.
Right now.
Like right now.
Candy store.
Okay, moving on then. That's the last of our new business. Upcoming agenda items. Okay.
I'll give you an update on the water tower at the next, it should be done, but I'll give you
Yeah,
an
you
update.
can do that under administrative reports. Okay, are there any other citizen comments? Okay, moving on. Any council comments? Okay. Any community events coming up?
Halloween,
Yeah.
Yeah, Halloween
Is that
times
6 to
are
8?
6 to 8.
the, Lions Club will have their Halloween costume contest. So, make sure you get the kids dressed up in something creative and cute and.
What's really concerning me, I think that's Friday the 31st, which to probably be a football game to boot.
Oh, right.
You know, Mike. Okay, anyhow. So,
Not putting that.
we have no closed session tonight, so I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Sterrett?
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting at 8:08.
Support.
Got that, Starrett and Shaw. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Here.
Meeting adjourned.
Yeah, we need to talk.